Hello friends, neighbors, and fellow VEDSies. I am sitting today in front of my music bookshelf because of reasons that I'm going to explain in a moment. So today I'm going to complete another challenge. I'm going to complete a challenge set by James F. He actually set this challenge a few years ago, or he did or somebody did, I don't remember, to teach you something in 5 minutes. I have actually completed this challenge before. I taught, hello Shadow, hi, yes I'm sitting on the floor. I have actually completed this challenge before. I taught everybody how to play the trumpet in 5 minutes back in 2011, I want to say. And today I decided to do it again, and I was reminded of the fact that Jesse is currently editing our next podcast episode of We Talk Stuff, the podcast that we do together, in which we also seek to teach you something, though not in 5 minutes. And the thing that I sought to teach everybody was about classical music, which is part of the reason why it's taking Jesse so long, I would imagine, because I talked for quite a while. So I'm sorry about that, Jesse, man, I really am. I tried to keep it pithy. But today I'm going to try to actually keep this to 5 minutes and teach you all about classical music in 5 minutes, starting now. So the way I look at classical music is to basically divide it up into 5 eras. Classical music is usually divided up into eras because it's a millennium worth of music thereabouts, but they're usually kind of abstract and they don't really have any practical kind of meaning unless you actually know what the words Baroque and classical and romantic actually mean. And so I'm dividing them into 5 different eras. And they're eras that have to do with the purpose of music, why people listened to it, why people sought to write it, why people sought to understand it, what music meant to people in this particular time period. So from about time immemorial, when music first really got started, to roughly, we're gonna say the 14th, 15th century, somewhere in there, music was primarily a mode of worship. Music has always been considered kind of a transcendent experience, and this was taken in kind of a literal fashion for a while. Basically, they felt that because of the way that the sounds lined up and the way that the physics of music seemed to just really fit together very mathematically, people believed for a long time that music was of the gods. It was God's voice, basically the closest thing that you could get to experiencing the supernatural, specifically in the form of plain chant. And the reason why it was plain chant is because it was very basic, very plain. They wanted to make sure that the music didn't distract from the actual text of the worship. They didn't want people worshiping the music, they wanted people worshiping God. And that's why we have Gregorian chant. But as often happens, composers got bored, and so they started experimenting with music and started doing new and different things. And during this time there was also secular music who could basically do whatever they want. And these two ideas sort of started to combine together and started to change the face of music. Music started to transition from being primarily a form of worship to now being a form of entertainment, which is the second era of music. Music was considered a high form of culture. It was high entertainment, and it was used by royalty and nobility to basically knock the tripod, trying to keep my dog entertained as well. It was used by royalty and nobility to basically show off their wealth, to show off their sense of culture. Hey look, I have a court musician. Hey look, I can play this instrument. I'm cultured, I'm important. And so a lot of the music that was written at that point was mostly background music. It wasn't really meant to stand the test of time. It wasn't really meant to be anything like really deep or meaningful. It was just meant to be in the background of a party or a service of some kind. But eventually this incidental music started to become more and more popular, and composers started to look at it a little bit more closely. This lines up actually with the Age of Enlightenment, when academics were looking at a lot of things more closely, and music happened to be one of those things. Eventually, people started to realize the emotional potential for these structures, and that you could actually tell a story with this, and you could portray an emotion with this type of music. And that's when we started to transition long about the 17th, 18th century, 18th, 19th century, 18th, 19th century, into music as a form of expression. And there was some disagreement as to whether music should still stick to the classical structure and use that as its emotional vehicle, or should just kind of go off and do its own thing and just be pure emotion. Both of these sides kind of diverged and started their own different thing, and both of them survived in some form. But eventually, expression then turned into philosophy as the romantic era of the 19th century transitioned into the modern era of the 20th century. People started to look for more efficiency in music, more progression in music. They were tired of these old emotional tonal pieces in the 19th century. They wanted something new. They wanted something to stimulate their senses and make them think a little bit more. And so the fourth era of music is music of philosophy, the philosophy of looking at a different way of writing music. And also just the philosophy of music in general. What is music even? How far can we push the boundaries of what music is until it stops being music? People wrote music with no key or no rhythm, and some guy wrote music that didn't have any sounds at all. And a lot of this music proved to actually be very thought-provoking, and it actually got people into a different mindset, a different level of thinking, a more transcendent level of thinking. And thus we have the last, and I would argue the current era of music, music as enhancement. Music as something that enhances another experience. Whether that experience is just kind of sitting in a room by yourself or watching a movie, watching a story. The music helps to tell the story. And in that way, classical music has kind of come full circle because music is once again proving to be a transcendent experience. Not necessarily connection to a deity as it was in time immemorial, but more just taking you outside of yourself, taking you beyond this experience and enhancing your experience into something more. And where classical music will go from here, I really don't know, but it will be interesting to watch over the next several decades and see what the next era of music brings us. And that's basically what I said in the podcast, but for like 10 times as long. Because I'm me. So anyway, I hope that was entertaining, and I hope you learned a little bit more about the thing that I spent like 6 years of my life studying. And until next time, friends and fellow VEDSies, I will see you tomorrow.